Howdy, I'm Chris from Dizzy Pig. This is Dizzy Thursday Live. Welcome. So this week we got Hooky with the Pig going on. We have had about maybe 25 people here hanging out outside. I grilled pork chops and we did some chicken curry. Rodrigo's cooking some chicken breast. It's a great, beautiful day here. So we're going to do Ask Chris today. So we've had some questions that are coming in. Autumn is here. She's going to be reading off these questions that I can answer. If you've got any more, I encourage you to please shoot them on in. I'll be here for a little while. I'm not sure exactly how long, depending on how many questions we get. But Autumn is here, and so we have some good questions. I did a little bit of studying to make sure I can have my act together. But
all right, guys, so we have some great questions. Most of these have come in over social media and with our Hooky with the Pig attendees today. One of the first ones here is from Catherine Trainer on Instagram. Have you used your steak rub at an SCA event?
Have I used our steak rub at SCA events? I did one SCA event, and that was, I wasn't even competing that weekend. I just decided to give it a run. I came in about the middle of the pack. Haven't really learned that whole game yet, but I do know some steak cooks that are raising the steaks on their steaks. With the cowlick is delicious on steaks, and actually I lost a bet to Johnny Trigg many years ago. He's the godfather of barbecue. And anybody hadn't heard of him, he's from Texas, and he's won a lot of competitions. And I lost a bet and had to cook a steak for him with the cowlick, and he said it was the best steak he ever had. So I don't think you can go wrong with either of them in an SCA contest. That's, I mean, we've got some other ones that are great on steak, like the red eye and the game on and the mole. But I don't think that's exactly what they're looking for in an SCA steak contest, but I'm not totally sure. We actually might host one of those. I'd like to learn more about these steak cook-offs because they're becoming really popular.
While we're talking about rubs, John Pressgraves on Facebook was wondering if any of our seasonings substitute one for one with some other seasonings. For example, does Bayouish sub in for any recipe calling for Cajun seasoning?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. But really, our seasonings, most of the seasonings in our original line are just really unique flavors that aren't imitating anything. They're new flavors that are different from anything else. So those are kind of hard for substituting. But our ish blends are perfect for substitutions. Like our Bombay curry ish would be a great substitute for anything that actually asks for curry powder. The same with our Bayou-ish, as you said, that can substitute for a Cajun seasoning or a blackening seasoning. And the Mediterranean-ish, either a Greek or Italian seasoning, and the fajita-ish for taco seasoning. And raising the steaks is actually really similar to the flavor profile of Montreal steak seasoning. So if you have something calling for that, you can easily substitute that. One I forgot is our shaking the tree is kind of our version of a lemon pepper. It's not a typical lemon pepper, but you could easily use that in place of lemon pepper. So I think that really hits all of them. Of course, we always encourage our customers to experiment with our flavors because they're so unique.
All right, Ben Hill is watching live right now and wants to know, when you're preparing a brisket, do you inject, and what rubs do you use?
When I'm preparing a brisket for competition, I do inject, and I use a beef stock, a homemade beef stock where I roast the bones first. I think that's the best flavor for injecting. And I will use a commercial pork injection that we sell at our store, like Butcher's Prime, that I mix half. You could also use salt in the beef stock only, and that would be a great injection. You don't need to inject the brisket, but I think it does help with the flavor, maybe a little bit with the moisture. For seasoning, our cowlick is what we've used in competition for many years. We won a lot of awards with that. Any of our beef rubs would be good on a brisket, including the red eye, the game on, raising the steaks, So there's a lot of choices there. And even if you wanted a typical or a more standard kind of barbecue like flavor profile, you could use Dizzy Dust. Although I personally don't like sweet on my brisket. I don't want any sugar.
All right, so SC Seminole on Instagram, he sees a lot of recipes call for rubbing meat with mustard before you add the rub, and some that don't. He said he's tried both and personally can't tell the difference. Is there any reason someone would want to add mustard?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one thing. If you can't tell the difference, then why do it? That's the bottom line. I have done it before. I think it might add a little bit of tang and maybe a little bit of flavor. But with all that you have going on in that cook, it's not really going to come through that much. And one thing I have found out is it will change the color of your meat. So I would, if you feel like you need like something to get the rub to it here, you could always start off with a little bit wetter meat, or you could rub it with oil. But I don't see any need to use mustard.
All right.
Appreciate the question.
So Daniel Fry is watching as well and wants to know if you're excited for Dizzy Fest.
Daniel, oh, Dizzy Fest. No, I have not had time to get excited about it, but it's our 13th festival. It's a fair amount of work involved with it, but I'm starting to feel it. It's definitely coming up. I'm sure the cooks are a little more excited than I am right now, but I'm hoping for good weather and a great day. And actually, our Dizzy Fest is May 4th, and it's going to sell out pretty soon, just so everybody knows. I expect it to sell out in the next few weeks.
All right, so we had a question from one of our attendees here at Hooky with the Pig. When do you need to replace a big green egg gasket, and how do you replace it?
Okay, when do you need to replace the gasket, and how do you replace it on a big green egg? A lot of that, as I tell my students sometimes, I get that question in the classes, it really depends on your personality. If you think that it's looking pretty worn out, you can change it. Me personally, I'm not extremely type A in that regard, and I'll go until I see leaks. And if I see smoke pouring out, where it should be a seal, then it's probably time to replace the gasket. And the most important thing is that you get all the old stuff off, and there's going to be grease in there, there's going to be all this stuff on the ceramic that's not going to allow the new gasket to stick. So you have to scrape the old gasket off. I get one of those plastic wire wheels, like a 3M wheel that goes on the end of your drill that's abrasive, but not metal, it's plastic. And I'll run that and get all the grease and stuff off of the ceramic, and then you use like acetone or rubbing alcohol. I think acetone is better to get it nice and clean, so that you get a really good bond when you put the new one on. So yeah, like I said, it all depends on your personality. I usually go 4 or 5 years in between changing mine.
All right, Ryan Tarragon is the next question. He came in through Instagram asking, what's your opinion on the Thermopop versus the MK4, or do you prefer the Dot? He's looking to add another thermometer to his daughter Nora Grace's
thanks for the question, Ryan. Yeah, you got to help the little chef grow. I'll talk about the thermometer. So we actually carry the ThermoWorks here, and the ones he asked about are the Dot, which is instant read thermometer, and the Thermapen, which is also an instant read thermometer. Well, actually, yeah, the Dot, right? This is called this is called a Dot, and this is called a Thermopop. So like the Thermopop and the Thermapen are pretty similar in that they are for quick reading. The Thermopop is less expensive. It's kind of an entry level. The Thermapen, like this one I'm holding in my hand, they have an MK4 now, which is pretty slick, but I've had this for like 17 years. This has been to every single one of our competitions, and it's been around the block and back, and it still works great. So the Thermapen is a choice of professionals, right? If you're into cooking and you know you're going to be into cooking for a while, you just get a Thermapen. It's like automatic. The Thermopop is a little bit slower of a read. It takes 4 or 5 seconds as opposed to 1 or 2. and it's not waterproof. Like the new Thermapens are actually waterproof. If you accidentally leave it outside, which happens, you still have a thermometer to use, where if you leave this outside and it rains, you're going to have problems. Otherwise, if you're just getting into cooking and you're not sure how long you're going to be into it or how much you'll be using it, then like a Thermopop is a great way to get into it, because you really want to know what temperature inside your meat is. The Dot is what I call a Polder style thermometer. I think that the original company who made these wired thermometers was called Polder, so I just started calling them Polders. But this is a ThermoWorks Dot, and it's a remote thermometer, so I can plug this into my meat, and I can have this sitting outside, and I can monitor what the temperature is. Unfortunately, it's tough to get along with just this, because when you put this in the meat, you're not sure if you have the coldest part of the meat. Like you might be, like there might be like another spot in the meat that's actually colder than what this is reading. So like this is really good just to monitor generally where you're at in your cook. Turkey's about 140 now. You got a little bit of time left. But if you're cooking a lean meat that is really prone to overcooking, you want to pull that off at the right time. So the Thermapen will actually enable you to see the temperature change as you go through the meat, so you can find the coldest spot. So I use the Thermapen and the Dot. If I was just getting started or I had a budget, I would go with the Thermopop, but I would want an instant read and a remote. So hope that answers that.
Yes, definitely. All right, Chris, this is a big question here while we're talking about tech. So Andrew on Instagram, he has the question about pit controllers. Do you use them, and does he need one? Is it worth the cost? Andrew says he has a digital thermometer. It measures the grill temp, and it's always significantly different than the dome temperature when he's cooking indirect. He's worried whatever thermometer the temp controller would use, it would be just as much skewed as the other thermometer and only be more wires and too much tech in his barbecue.
Is that too much technology? That's always a big question. Yes, I do use a temperature controller. No, you don't need one. Yes, it's worth the cost, especially if you like to sleep. And that's where it comes in for me, is if I want to go to sleep, I got some pork butts on or some briskets on. We just used the temperature controller at the competition this weekend. And I didn't have to worry about it. I slept through the night like a baby. How much is that worth to you? I don't know, but it's worth a lot to me. So I love the temperature controller. Now, what you're asking about the pit temp and the dome temp, that's kind of a different subject, but it's a perfect time to talk about that. If you're cooking indirect on a Big Green Egg, or really any cooker where you have a barrier in between the heat and the meat, and you put a bunch of cold meat in there, the temperature at the grill level is going to be cooler than it is up in the dome. Just because you got a bunch of cold meat, there's a little eddy in there. And that is where you should be monitoring with your pit controller. When you first start your cook, the dome and the grid temperature can be up to 80 or 90 degrees of a difference, all depending on how much cold meat you have and how close or how large your indirect barrier is. So there's a lot of factors there. And yeah, if you're an engineer, why don't you hook up 2 probes, one on each side of the meat, and then your dome, and you can log and see what the difference is. Or you can go, simple and just start off a little hotter. Start off at 300 instead of 250, and that'll kind of make up for the difference of that cold meat being on there. But for sure, if you like to sleep, I would definitely look into a pit controller. We're using the Flame Boss now. They work great. I hope that answers that question. If you have any more, shoot them in.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's about all we have time for, Chris. Thank you.
You're welcome.